Welcome back to the Badass Literature Society, where badasses come together to rate and review novels recommended by you. Hi, I'm Michael.
This is Barbara.
And I'm Lauren.
This month we read The Housemaid by Freida McFadden. Freida McFadden is a #1 New York Times, Amazon Charts, USA Today, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, Sunday Times, and Publishers Weekly best-selling author. She's also a physician specializing in brain injury who has penned multiple best-selling psychological thrillers and medical humor novels. Freida's work has been selected as one of Amazon Editor's Best Books of the Year. She is the winner of the International Thriller Writers Award for Best Paperback, and she is a Goodreads Choice Award winner. Her novels have been translated into 40 languages.
So she's a badass, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
I didn't know she was a physician.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's just a badass all around.
Wow. Okay, interesting.
She lives with her family and cat in a centuries-old 3-story home overlooking the ocean with staircases that creak and moan with each step, and nobody could hear you if you scream. Unless you scream really loudly, maybe. That was directly from her website. I thought that was kind of fun. So I left it in
funny.
there. Barbara, you want to tell us a little bit about this book?
Sure. This was originally published on April 26th of 2022. Genre is considered thriller, mystery, and suspense. Depending on the book, it is 329 pages, and it currently has a 4.3 on Goodreads, 4.5 on Amazon, and a 4.6 on Audible. As of the recording of this podcast, it has just been nominated for the Goodreads Choice Award for Mystery and Thriller for 2022. We also think it's important for readers to know what, if any, representation is in the books we read. So for this book, there is one supporting POC character and no LGBTQ plus characters or characters with disabilities.
And Lauren, would you like to give us a brief synopsis?
My synopsis is that it is a very twisty psychological thriller. Full stop. I will read the back of the book. Welcome to the family, Nina Winchester says as I shake her elegant, manicured hand. I smile politely, gazing around the marble hallway. Working here is my last chance to start fresh. I can pretend to be whoever I like. But I'll soon learn that the Winchesters' secrets are far more dangerous than my own. Every day I clean the Winchesters' beautiful house top to bottom. I collect their daughter from school, and I cook a delicious meal for the whole family before heading up to eat alone in my tiny room on the top floor. I try to ignore how Nina makes a mess just to watch me clean it up. How she tells strange lies about her own daughter, and how her husband Andrew seems more broken every day. But as I look into Andrew's handsome brown eyes, so full of pain, it's hard not to imagine what it would be like to live Nina's life. The walk-in closet, the fancy car, the perfect husband. I only try on one of Nina's pristine white dresses once, just to see what it's like. But she soon finds out, and by the time I realize my attic bedroom door only locks from the outside, it's far too late. But I reassure myself, the Winchesters don't know who I really am. They don't know what I'm capable of.
Boom, boom, boom.
Indeed.
So, what did you think about The Housemaid? Remember, no spoilers.
This overall, I guess, it was, in the beginning, it was hard for me to get into this book. I did not like Millie's character whatsoever. And I also found that the writing style was really hard for me to get into. I did not like how it sounded. How do you say that? Like a conversation, if that makes sense. I'm not sure
if that like the dialogue was written very like a movie kind of. Is that what you mean?
Know.
Like conversational?
I don't know about a movie.
The way that it was written, the word choice was very conversational. Is that?
I guess. Yeah, but I just didn't enjoy the writing style very much. And then it took about, because I if I'm not mistaken, the book is split up into 3 parts. I think it's only 3 parts, so. Right?
Did you not like the first the POV? Like the first person, or because you didn't like the character?
I'm not a huge fan. First off, I'm not a huge fan of first person, but I don't mind it if it's written well. This is not the case for me. I didn't think the first person point of view was written that well, because it's that, and I didn't like Millie whatsoever, so that could be another issue.
I liked the first person on this one, but it's hard to like Millie, so I get that.
Yeah, so it could be that, and I haven't read her other books, so I'm not sure if this is her style of writing, period, or if it's just for Millie's character. So yeah, it's hard. I don't want to be like too judgy on that, but I definitely did struggle, actually, all the way until part 2. Then I was like, oh, okay, I'm enjoying this now. And then it was actually, I finished the book really quick after part 2, but like it was like really hard for me to get through the first part of the book, which is the bulk of the book. I think it's like 45% or 50% of which is just part 1, I think, and then
Something like
part
that,
2
yeah.
and 3 are the last part. But yeah, I kind of struggled at the beginning for this for multiple reasons, actually, and I'll probably get into it further in the spoiler section. But yeah, afterwards I enjoyed it, but it was a struggle for me.
So I have a somewhat similar answer to Barbara. I struggled to get through the beginning of this book, but so the book is broken down into a prologue, 3 parts, and an epilogue. And from the twist that will remain unspoken, at the end of part 1 until the end of the book, I was hooked. So like I flew through from that point on. I think I read the book in like 2 sittings. Like whereas like the rest of it, I was kind of like, I think that it was more the character of Millie that I was not a big fan of, and less Freida McFadden's writing style, because I found that I didn't like it in part 1, but I didn't mind it when it was other perspective characters.
That's because in other perspectives wasn't first person; it was third person. Only Millie's is first person.
Well, then maybe I just didn't like how she wrote first person. Then
Did you even notice that?
did not. No,
See,
nope.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't pick up on that as much as you do. But overall, I liked the book. I thought that the twists that are all over the place were extremely fun. There was more than one time I was sitting next to Barbara reading it where like I was verbally would say "Holy shit" when something happened, which is always fun. So overall, I enjoy the story. It was very twisty and definitely unpredictable in a lot of ways.
Yes, I feel like this question's obvious for me since this was one that I chose, but I did enjoy it. This was one of the books that, like, because I'm fairly decent when it comes to predicting psychological thriller type books. Sometimes I don't like to try though because that's part of the ride. I'm not Barbara level good at predicting though. I feel like she
No
can
one
predict
is.
all the
No one is.
genres. I only can predict like
Oh
the
my
certain
gosh.
genres, but I have recommended it to lots of different people, but I guess we're gonna talk about that next. It was, yeah, it just had a lot of different directions that the plot could have gone in. And so I felt like at the beginning I was like, okay, I'm like making 3 different simultaneous predictions, like, oh, if this happens, then this is gonna be how it goes. And so that was always fun. But then every time I felt like I had a solid prediction, then it would shift again, leaving me needing to finish the book and find out how the hell it was actually going to end, which was kind of like Michael. I can't remember though, because I feel like the start was a little slow for me too, but I think I got into it prior to 40% in. So, but I think mine was more just like, I need to know what direction it's going to go. And
And
I
it
read
may
this
not be
one quickly
40%.
too.
I don't remember that definitively. It was just whenever it transitioned from part 1 to part 2. That was
Yeah,
when
I don't
that was the
remember.
hook for me.
Yeah, I don't remember when that happened. I think though, like, well, I'll save that for after the spoilers. So, yes,
This one's definitely tricky to talk about without getting into spoiler territory.
indeed.
So, as always, we are not going to get into our individual ratings for now. Got to wait till the end for that. But our group score for The Housemaid was a 7.333 or 7.3 repeating out of 10. Next question. Would you recommend this book? I think it's one that's pretty safe to recommend to anybody who enjoys thrillers or this genre. If it's somebody who is, kind of like every other time I answer this question, if it's someone who hates this genre, then maybe don't recommend it. But otherwise, I feel like it's a pretty safe recommendation. It's a pretty short book, so it's not too hard to digest. And I think if you're into this kind of a story with thrilling, twisty, all that fun stuff, then it's an easy one to recommend.
Yeah, I've recommended it to a lot of people already, like I said, and all of which have enjoyed it so far, unless you guys didn't, which will I didn't know when I was writing my notes whether you did or not. But yeah, I would definitely recommend it.
So, I mean, I don't. Man, it's hard. I guess I would recommend it, but I think I would only recommend it to people who I know like this genre. I feel like this one, I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence of recommending this or not. I feel like yes, for the most part I would, depending on who the person is, but I would like to read another one of her books, and not in the series, cuz I want like something completely different to see if the writing style changes or anything like that, to see if like maybe the gripes I have with this book is just this book and not the author herself. So I guess I would recommend it if I could read more of her books. And if I know you're one of those people who enjoys these books anyways. I don't know if I would be like, if someone didn't read this type of book and be like, this is the one if you want this one. Because I feel like there are better, what did I say the genre? I already forgot. Murder or thriller, mystery, suspense ones. I think I have other ones that I would prefer over this one personally. So yes and no.
Fair. For those of you leaving us at this point, don't forget to give us a rating if you like us, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. On both places, our handle is at Badass Lit Pod. We'd love to hear from you. If you've got a book you want us to read for the show, please let us know. And now, Lauren is going to give us a short preview of what's coming up next month. We will be reading The Red Palace by June Her.
Joseon, Korea, 1758. There are a few options available to illegitimate daughters in the capital city, but through hard work and study, 18-year-old Hyeon has earned a position as a palace nurse. All she wants is to keep her head down, do a good job, and perhaps finally win her estranged father's approval. But Hyeon is suddenly thrust into the dark and dangerous world of court politics when someone murders 4 women in a single night, and the prime suspect is Hyeon's closest friend and mentor. Determined to prove her beloved teacher's innocence, Hyeon launches her own secret investigation. In her hunt for the truth, she encounters Eojin, a young police inspector, also searching for the killer. When evidence begins to point to the crown prince himself as the murderer, Hyeon and Eojin must work together to search the darkest corners of the palace to uncover the deadly secrets behind the bloodshed.
Dun,
Excited for this
dun.
Dun, dun.
Yeah, it should be good. I'm excited for it too. Remember, the second part of this episode is an in-depth look at The Housemaid. So if you do want to read it, stop listening now and come back when you're done. Seriously, for this one, if you do want to read it, it's only 300 pages. There's lots of spoilers we're going to go over. Don't ruin the book for yourself.
You would be doing yourself a disservice.
You wouldn't even want to read it at that point.
No, agree. Totally agree.
Yep.
My bulky blender was such a pain to use, I ended up hardly ever using it at all. But the BlendJet 2 portable blender makes blending so easy and convenient, I use it just about every day. BlendJet 2 is portable, so you can blend up a smoothie at work, a protein shake at the gym, or even a margarita at the beach. It's small enough to fit in a cup holder, but powerful enough to blast through tough ingredients like ice and frozen fruit with ease. BlendJet 2 is whisper quiet, so you can make your morning smoothie without waking up the whole house. It lasts for 15 plus blends and recharges quickly via USB-C. Best of all, BlendJet 2 cleans itself. Just blend water with a drop of soap and you're good to go. With over 30 plus colors and patterns to choose from, there's a BlendJet 2 to complement just about any style. I rock the ruby metallic print myself because I'm clearly a certified badass. What are you waiting for? Go to blendjet.com and grab yours today, and be sure to use the promo code BADALITPOD12, that's BADALITPOD12, to get 12% off your order and free 2-day shipping. No other portable blender on the market comes close to the quality, power, and innovation of the BlendJet 2. They guarantee you'll love it or your money back. Blend anytime, anywhere with the BlendJet 2 portable blender. Go to blendjet.com and use the code BADALITPOD12 to get 12% off your order and free 2-day shipping. Shop today and get the best deal ever.
Now, for those of you sticking around for the spoilers, here we go. So like always, we're going to start off the second half nominating the characters that we think deserve the Badass Character Award. Barbara, who is your nominee?
I had a hard time picking this because I'm not going to lie. I feel like everyone is a little psychopathic in this book. Like they all have some really they're all very, very gray characters, extremely gray characters, and it's kind of, I'm not gonna lie, I like gray characters, but in this scenario where it's not a fantasy novel and they're like legitimately real people, quote unquote, it's really hard to root for great characters. Like, I feel like in a fantasy novel, it's kind of
just
easier.
Pick and choose.
I know, but it's kind of, I just feel like in a fantasy novel where you're like, okay, like, you know, there's dragons and mermaids and whatever. It's like, oh, it's okay to kind of maybe enjoy for a great character. But here, like, these are supposed to be real people and they're screwing around with real people's other lives, it's kind of be like, who am I gonna root for? It's like, ugh, I kind of feel kind of weird doing that. So I'm gonna give it to Cecilia, the daughter, because I felt so bad for her. And given everything that she has gone through, Homie was doing pretty good, if you ask me. So
she was a little morally questionable herself.
she's a 7-year-old. That's what I'm saying. Like, she's a 7-year-old.
How can she be the badass though? She was like the victim here.
Okay, and you can't be a badass if you're a victim?
Not the only victim. She was just such a minor character. Anyway, you're entitled to your wrong opinion.
Oh, wow. I'm just kidding. Okay, the problem is, like, I don't want to pick either of the two women characters. I'm not picking Andrew for obvious reasons. And I'm left with Enzo. I don't mind Enzo. I liked his character, but I kind of feel weird picking, like, a dude who, like, he did stuff, but not really. Like, does that make sense? Like,
he did more stuff than Cecilia.
Cecilia was just kind of there. She's the only, like, she's the daughter, and I kind of feel bad for her. I don't know. So, okay, fine. To answer this question, no one. No one deserves the Badass Character Award from Barbara. No one does. I don't think anyone deserves that in this particular book. There.
If there was, like, a neat cat or something, Barbara would choose the cat.
If there was a dog or an animal, I would have picked them. Yes, 100%.
So my nominee for this was Enzo. I also agree with Barbara that it was, at least I didn't want to pick either of the female characters, the female leads, for various reasons that we'll get into. It's hard to. Everybody's a little messed up in this story for different reasons, and by messed up I mean like morally not where you would expect like the badass character award to traditionally go. So I'm picking Enzo because Enzo's the gardener. Enzo is someone who, righteously wants to defend these women that are in a not so great situation, up to the point of, extreme violence. So I'm going with Enzo. He's a big guy. He can act on that if he wants to. Enzo's my choice.
I also went with Enzo for similar reasons that Barbara said. Like, I think that Millie, our main character, who we get like her point of view, has some badass moments, especially towards the end. But overall, like, I had enough, I think, issues along the way. I don't know why I can't view her as like the badass character award winner, because she did some badass things that we'll talk about later, but like to survive essentially. And then Nina, I would never pick Nina anyway. So Enzo, it was. He stayed in a job that like he otherwise probably wouldn't have, because I think he wanted to look out for the people that
agreed
were there, and like he had a lot of probably opportunities to like not just to bounce out of that situation and like be better off. And I feel like he throughout the novel, like, and I knew he was one prediction that I got right. Like I knew I was like, the gardener's gonna be like a key person in this eventually, because he kept like popping up as far as like saying different things, and he was trying to warn.
I thought he was a police undercover or something, is what I originally thought. Yeah.
I just thought like he was trying to warn her, because my initial thing was, okay, Millie's gonna move in and like something crazy is gonna happen, and the gardener's trying to warn her because the last nanny got murdered or something was my initial like plot thought. But ultimately I would pick Enzo because I think he was the least. I mean, he wasn't really crazy at all, I don't think, other than like some people would think it was crazy to stay in that situation. But I think he had good morals and he had good character, and so I nominate him.
So I'm going to alter mine slightly, and it's going to be a combo award after I do that between Enzo and Millie, because, trigger warning for our listeners, I'm going to talk about sexual assault very briefly. I forgot that Millie went to jail for literally murdering the man who was trying to sexually assault her friend, and that is absolutely badass. Yep. And
I think Millie's a badass in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm going to get into why I have an issue with Millie, and it's probably not what anyone thinks is the issue. Yeah. So, but it is what it is.
Anyway, badass award goes to Millie/Enzo. We'll chop the award in half and hand it to two people. Moving on from there, let's get into our character discussion. Which one of you would like to talk about Millie?
So Millie is the protagonist. She is a young woman with a troubled past who takes this job at this rich family's house as a live-in nanny / housemaid, essentially. We find out very early in the book, I think even like maybe the first couple of pages, that she's actually living out of her car. She's been like homeless, that she just was released from jail or prison, one of the two. And we don't know why, like for a long time. We don't know the reason.
Literally towards the end,
Yeah, it's
very
really
end
towards the end.
Yeah.
So like that was why part of my other predictions were like, well, she just got out of prison. We don't really know her past. So is this going to be like, oh, I'm predicting that she's going to be the one getting murdered, but really like she's going to be the aggressor. So we don't know a whole lot about her past other than it was rough and she's a recent release from prison. And we know that she really, really wants to have this job work out for her because she is living in her car and needs funds. She takes an empathetic stance toward Andrew, which is the husband of Nina in the situation, and that ends up going exactly how you think it's going to for quite a while. Am I missing anything about Millie?
No, we can get into her later.
Pretty solid broad strokes there. Barbara, you want to tell us about Nina?
Sure. Nina is the wife of Andrew and the person who hires Millie, who is the nanny or housemaid, whatever you want to call her. She is portrayed in the first part of the book as this psychotic housewife, essentially, and come to find out she's not like that at all. It was all a play. She was playing a role so she could get out of being Andrew's wife because he's psychopathic. So that's pretty much her, is she's playing a role in the beginning, and you don't know any of this until you hit part 2 and you get her point of view of like how she ended up in this position and why she wants to get out of the position. And I thought that was really, really interesting getting her point of view of that. But
I would challenge, though, that Nina is not at all like she portrayed herself to be, because it takes she's got some psychological messed up things too, like the fact that she was willing to essentially sacrifice an innocent young person.
But I mean, I feel like in her position, I understand why she would do that, because after 7 years of being tortured that way, wouldn't you literally do anything for your child? I mean, I understand that. At that point, your self-preservation for you and your child probably dictates everything you're doing, and the only way, like, she tried everything else before this to try to get away from Andrew, and this is the only way that she saw that, and it worked. She's not wrong. It worked. So it's like, I understand where, if anything, honestly, I like Nina more than Millie, personally. I preferred her more than Millie after finding out what she went through. Like, bitch was gaslit by everyone.
It's true.
So I understand where she's coming from. She's not innocent. I'm not saying what she did was right. I can empathize, though, with her.
Oh yeah, I can empathize too.
All right, well, I guess I'll talk about Andrew Winchester, Nina's husband. Extremely successful, very charming, really just all-around good guy. He didn't really have any flaws or anything at all. He was just kind of there in the story, surrounded by these crazy... No, I'm just kidding. He's definitely presented that way in part 1, though, that he is successful.
No.
That's not a lie.
You can totally
he's like presented as like, oh, he's the victim because Nina's cray. Nina's crazy.
Let me rephrase that. The way the author wants you to see Andrew is
through Millie's eyes.
He is the victim in this story because Nina is absolutely insane, and Andrew is this drop dead gorgeous man who just isn't getting what he wants, and woe is Andrew. And you find out, obviously, like Barbara said, that Nina has intentionally painted the scene this way so that Andrew and Millie will connect and fall for each other. And she can get the hell away from Andrew because Andrew is actually a psychopath will enjoys torturing people in sick and twisted ways that will
not people, the women that he is with,
torturing his romantic partner. And so that is Andrew. And as this description says, he does harbor secrets of his own, and you do find out, and we'll talk about what may have led him down the path that he went down. But that, in a short, small nutshell, is Andrew. We'll probably pretty briefly cover these next two. Lauren, do you introduce Cecilia?
Sure. So Cecilia is Nina and Andrew's daughter. She's
Cecilia's
very shy.
Nina's daughter,
Just
technically.
you're the
Oh,
one.
well,
Whoever
yeah.
wrote that.
Well,
I didn't
That's
write
your
that.
fault,
I was just
Michael.
reading it.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm correct.
So
I'm
It's
correcting
technically
myself.
Nina's daughter
Nina's
before she
daughter.
got married to Andrew.
Yes.
She
So
lives
Andrew
with them.
maybe like adopted her or whatever. So she is Nina's daughter, and she is presented as like shy and reserved, but she's really another victim. I think all of the female characters are victims in this story of Andrew, essentially, and just the Winchester family line, so to speak, which we'll get into that later. But Cecilia she's just a kid that gets stuck in the crossfire of all of this and probably is going to have a lot of trauma later on down the road.
100%.
She's a very minor character, just in the sense that we don't get. I wish we maybe would have seen a little bit more of her.
Yeah, agreed.
But like the scenes that you do see is like you're already kind of seeing that she's adopting some of the more manipulative tendencies that she's observed from like her parents, and you wonder how much of that is coached in this scenario once we learn about Nina. I don't know. So I had mixed feelings about Cecilia.
She's another victim. Andrew literally used her like Nina's love for her daughter against her to keep her in this vicious cycle. And you can see Cecilia acts out the only way she knows how, because she's literally stuck wearing creepy little 1900 Victorian style dresses because he makes her. And she gets made, like, if you think about it, she's a 7-year-old kid who gets made fun of for wearing this dress. She knows that her stepdad is abusing her mom in some certain way, because anytime she acts out or her mom acts out, she disappears on end. And then she's stuck with psychopath dad here that she knows is not normal. Like, it's just, I honestly feel bad for her.
I think at least for me anyway, similar to Nina, I did not like Cecilia either in part one, because I think that from Millie's perspective, you're supposed to see her as like the stuck-up
bratty
little girl of these
these
rich people. And obviously then in part two, you learn everything we just talked about, that she's actually like, she wants to act out and she's tired of this, but she knows if she acts out, her mom locked in the attic for however many days that's going to be this time. Anyway, we'll talk about some of the specifics there later. Barbara, do you want to cover our last character here, Enzo?
Sure. And Enzo is another piece of meat for Millie to ogle, however you say that word. Ogle with Andrew. And she pretty much creepily hits on him, and he goes, "Bitch, no." Sorry, that scene was really funny. Hard. Oh, man. Anyways, he's the gardener. Actually, the whole neighborhood's gardener and stuff like that, and he's described this as like extremely sexy, massive Italian stallion man, and all these women have crushes on him, and he pretty much kind of sticks around, like Lauren mentioned, because he is watching out for Nina, because he finds out, like, he's the only one that actually believes Nina when she tells him, like, hey, my husband is abusive to me. No one else believes her. He's the only one. So he's kind of like her confidant and tries helping her to get away from Andrew, and the only, I feel like, sane character in the novel. So that's him.
I will share something fun, because I think you guys will get a kick out of it for Enzo, for me. So reading this book, Enzo, when you first meet him, his physical description is not like gone into great detail. And so for some reason, the Enzo name triggered like, oh, gardener Enzo, old Italian guy. Got it. So I'm envisioning this old man. And then the next time you meet him, which is not that much longer, then you get like he's like this, like, rippling muscles and like this jacked guy that all the women in the neighborhood want to sleep with. But because my brain had already been like old man, old Italian guy, gardener, it just became old Italian guy, gardener that's jacked. And that's like the way that
was like all these women in the neighborhood have like an old person kink or something.
Interesting.
It was just funny.
I could have sworn the very first time you meet him, she mentions that he's a young, attractive.
I don't remember them saying young.
Oh no.
Yeah, I don't think that they did until later on, and then it's more clear. But at that point, he was already painted in my imagination as this old man gardener, and it's like, okay, old man gardener with big rippling muscles, like
big muscles,
jacked old man. Got it. Cool. Anyway, I just thought that was funny. But the first question we'll get into for our discussion questions for this one is, Millie is portrayed as a complex protagonist. How do her flaws and strengths shape your perception of her? And did your opinion of her change over the course of the novel? and I find it interesting.
Yes.
This is Barbara's first, so this should be fun.
Yes. So Millie is an extremely complex protagonist. Like I said, like I mentioned before, in the very beginning, I absolutely hated her guts. Absolutely hated her guts. I didn't like almost anything about her. I understand her circumstances. We don't know too much about her, even though we get her point of view. We see her as I saw her, I should say, I shouldn't put words in other people's mouth. I saw her as this idiotic person who went to jail for some reason. I figured the reason she went to jail is probably because she murdered someone, because she literally mentions that she was in jail from 17 and then until now, which was 10 years. So she was in jail for 10 years. I was like, the only reason why you would go to jail for that long is if you did something really bad, quote unquote. The reason why I didn't like her in the very beginning was I feel like, given the circumstances and given the fact that I understand, like, she's like, oh, this is the only job I can get, I have to stick around, blah blah blah, and then she willingly sleeps with a married man. I don't care who you are and what your circumstances are, and if you believe you're a better match for that man. I've always found that trope not kind of gross. I don't like that. So that's one thing I wasn't a huge fan of her. I understand that she like went to jail at a young age, and we don't figure that out until a little bit later in her point of view. And so I was willing to forgo why she acted not like she was 27. To me, she seemed much younger than that, and it could also be, like I said, because she went to jail during her primitive years, really, as an adult. And so, like, she didn't really learn, I feel like, normal stuff. You learn that kind of stuff, those 10 years in jail, because, like, I'm assuming going to jail, all this stuff, and then being out in the real world is very different. So obviously I feel like she missed some social cues there. So that's another reason why I wasn't a huge fan of her. And then when we get to parts 2 and 3 and we find out, like, her situation and that she was a badass who defended her friend, which also, F you, friend. I thought that was really crappy of her friend. And she did all this stuff. Like, you find out that Millie is kind of an aggressive person, and not kind of, like, she actually is a very aggressive person. She has an aggressive personality. And after learning all that, what I didn't like about the part 1 is it seems so out of character for someone who knew how to find these guys, how to find them, because, like, she had an issue with that guy that she murdered for her friend. She had an issue with one of her teachers who was sexually assaulting her by being creepy towards her. She had an issue with, after she got out of jail, she had an issue with the guy who, like, slapped her ass at work or, like, was saying some stuff to her, and she had no qualms, like, punching him in the face, essentially. I just found it kind of weird that, knowing all of this about her, that she would actually fall for Andrew. And I don't mean, like, physically, because I get it. Homegirl didn't get some for 10 years. Like, I get it, okay? I just meant, like, I'm surprised that she was manipulated by him and she didn't see through that.
But if you look at it, like, most of the people that she was the aggressor towards, or, like, did that, were, like, overtly malintent, right? Like, the guy that's slapping her ass, like, you're reacting to that. Andrew was much more sneaky and manipulative. So, like, it's not I don't know, when I look at that, but
I guess I just, like, that's the only thing I didn't.
Also, you got to remember too, she's getting double manipulated.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. I feel like she's a very street smart character, but it didn't show in the first half. So I found it kind of weird learning all of this about her, and I just couldn't put those two pieces of her into one person, if that makes sense. Like, part 1 Millie and then part 2 and 3 Millie and epilogue Millie didn't seem like the same character at all to me. I felt like I was reading two completely different characters. I feel like maybe if she would have bridged that gap a little bit better, I would have liked Millie's character. If she wouldn't have made her seem so, what is that word, like, Sally Mae? Is that the characterization of, like, like, I think that's a thing. Like,
Like,
someone
made her seem like more passive on the front end?
Yeah. Like, the only part that we got of her being such a, I don't even want to call her aggressive, just being the way that she is when she slams that glass on the ground and gets really angry. But before that, like, she's an extremely passive character, and I understand she's like, oh, I have to make this work. I have to make this work. I just feel like maybe if she would have dropped a little bit of instances where she wasn't so passive, I think I would have been able to, like, put these two versions of her better. But I don't know. Overall, I thought she was written well. It's just the first part of it, I think I had a huge issue with. And obviously, yeah, my opinion of her completely changed once we got to that other part. Maybe it's because we didn't learn about that part until later, and that was supposed to be like an aha moment. But, like, I feel like if you know anything about the system, is like, someone doesn't go to jail for 10 years at that age for something like stealing. So clearly she did something much worse, quote unquote. And I'm not saying what she did was bad. Honestly, I like applaud her for that personally. It's just I don't know. I guess I think I'm talking too much, but that's my perspective, I guess, of Millie.
So yeah, I mean, Millie is definitely, like Barbara said, a complex protagonist, and the question said that too. I think that it would have overall, I think I would have enjoyed her character in part one more if we had gotten the aha moment that she, what she went to jail for, the reason behind that. Because I feel like in some ways, Millie is intended to symbolize like unbridled feminine rage, and we don't get that at all in part one. But if you show that scene first, like if the prologue of the book is like learning that she killed this guy who was trying to sexually assault her friend, and then learning about the other things, the other violent things that she's done, then you see this character, if it's meant to symbolize unbridled feminine rage, and then you see her in a desperate situation in the entirety of part one, trying to force that down and make herself small to keep this job. And I think that would have made her character more effective throughout part one. And then maybe had some of the other things that Barbara mentioned be more believable. Obviously, she's getting manipulated from both sides. She's unknowingly getting manipulated by both characters because Nina's pretending to be this crazy person and Andrew is putting on all the charms to pretend that he's this amazing guy that is apparently his MO. He pretends to be this amazing guy and then is like flips a switch. So, but to stick with the order of the book instead of my pretend order I'd love things to go in, my opinion of her did change because at the beginning of the book I did not like her in part one. I did not like her character, but I did. By the end of the book, I really liked her character. And it got me to the point where you even like, you read the epilogue and it sets up to how like Millie can be the character and it's going to carry over into like a series of books. And I was like, that would be interesting to see. I was curious enough to like how they're going to do that. And I didn't hate Millie anymore enough to be like, oh no. So I at least ended the book curious to like, okay, what's next for Millie?
There's 2 more books.
That was my perspective on her character arc.
Yeah, I haven't read the second book yet, but there are 2 more in the Housemaids series that she's written. My perception of Millie is complicated. I think it changed throughout the novel. I think you guys said a lot of it. I feel like though when I was reading the first part, I picked up on, I think just because of the first person point of view, that she was like holding back some of that, like just in the sense that she just kept reiterating like, this bitch is crazy, like, but I really need this job. Or like there were several, I guess, scenes, and I'm trying to think. Like the one where she intentionally like throws all the food on the floor so that she can clean it up or whatever. And I feel like I remember reading that and thinking like, is this where we find out what she went to prison for? Because she seemed real angry about that. But then she's like, but I really need this job. So that part of it pissed me off simultaneously just because of Nina's treatment to her in general in that moment. But then also like made me mad because of like what you said, Barbara, which is like, stand up for yourself. God, like,
yeah. I just feel like someone like her would not put up with that. Like she literally, I feel like, I don't care if it's a man or a woman, like I feel like she would have bitch slapped Nina after the third time of her like throwing food all over her or like accusing her of stealing. Like I feel like Millie would have been like, okay, bitch, I'm gonna punch you in the face. Right. And she did, and I understand like we're supposed to see like she's super desperate at this point. Desperate. Like super, super desperate. But like if that's the case, then I feel I don't know.
That was my feeling too. It was just like, why aren't you standing up for yourself more? Like, why?
Yeah.
How'd you get here? But then I think like it is meant to reiterate like just her level of desperation, because in her previous like situations, obviously using violence did not end well for her in multiple situations. Like she lost her job, she went to jail, like, you know, those different things. And so my thought was, okay, she's trying to quote unquote like not be that person that is violent, and so she's desperate to keep the job. But like,
I get that, but I feel like people like her, like clearly she knew that when she got this other job and she still punched that guy in the face. So I just feel like
yeah,
desperate or not, she knew what she already was signing up for. Like why was this the no, mustn't touch any, you know, like I feel like that's the weird part that I for her character. Like it
I
just
also
doesn't make
wondered
sense
how
to
much
me.
of it was like a fear of Nina's crazy, that like she's like, well, I'm crazy because like internally like I murdered somebody, but this bitch is next level, like, you know, like I wonder
Man,
how much of
I
it
don't
came from that.
know. I don't know. I feel like if you know yourself and know what you're capable of, you really shouldn't be afraid of Nina. Like,
I
Yeah,
feel like
that's true.
the answer to that, Barbara, is that the job where she just punched the guy in the face, she was a waitress at a bar. And a lot of people look at those jobs as more of a dime a dozen. When she gets this job as the housemaid for the Winchesters, it's a very
I know
high
she
paying
feels
job.
super
She's like,
lucky.
I don't understand why they're gonna pay me this much money, but like that was enough to like get her
right?
out of her
It smelled.
car. Her life
It
was gonna
smelled
change.
fishy. Like it's too good to be true. And she saw that it was too good to be true. That's what I'm
Yeah,
saying. Like
But did
someone
it
that
anyway, because
who
she needed.
seemed, I get that, but someone who seems street smart like her, fine, okay, fine. She's desperate for this job. Oh, I'll give you that. But the fact that then you're willing to sleep with the man
yeah,
whose wife is paying you and you know that she's quote unquote psychotic, why are you willing to cross the line on one thing but not on the other? Like,
right.
why are you not willing to slap a bitch, but you're willing to F the husband and potentially lose your job? Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, none of this for her character to me makes sense.
I think the manipulation from Andrew makes sense to me just because I think she started off, okay, I'm desperate for the job, and Nina is crazy, but I can tolerate her crazy, and I know how to navigate that because
But
I
she
really need the
started hitting on
money.
him first. He
Yes.
wasn't attracted to her at
Well,
first.
he was friendly,
No,
overly
because he
friendly.
didn't want to hire the nanny cuz he was all like, "Oh, like you're bringing someone into my
Dungeon.
perfectly curated psychopathic house, you know?" So that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying, like she's the one who initiated it. I don't think it was him.
He started being friendly, being overly friendly, and being like super
But
appreciative
he's
of her
like, I feel like
cooking and
he's like
super
that with
whatever.
everyone though, because he wants to paint him. He sees himself as like God's gift to women.
And it's
Yes.
clearly
So
very effective because that's all he did with Nina, and he tricked her
Yeah.
into marrying him and
true.
moving her daughter into the house. And
I
all
think
he
it's
did
just
was
part
be
of his
nice to her at work.
manipulation. I think it's part of his manipulation. So I think like Millie, unfortunately, was desperate enough for this job, but then also succumbed to the friggin'
She
crazy
was touch
manipulator.
starved, is what happened.
That too. That
Because
too.
if
But yeah,
Enzo
I
would have
went
just slept with her, this could have
right.
all been avoided.
Could have been all avoided.
Damn it, Enzo, that's your
I,
only flaw.
I think she let
Right.
herself get sucked into a fantasy that she had in her head
She
Yeah.
because
did.
in her mind, Andrew's this like perfect guy who's
Innocent
super
guy.
successful and very rich, and like Nina's living the life like that she would dream to live, and she seems like she's just like, what the heck is
Doesn't
she doing? She's
appreciate it.
she's blowing it. She doesn't appreciate this at all. I would
Hmm.
appreciate it. I would appreciate it if I had that chance, and then she
Yeah,
lets the
but
fantasy
like
run
that's what I'm
away.
saying. I understand that for most people, but like she seemed like she was smarter than that.
Yeah.
Personally, like I feel like she should have seen the curtain, the man behind the mask type thing, if that makes sense. Like this whole little picture
Narcissists really
perfect
be.
world isn't obviously true, because I feel like she should know better, because no one believes her when she was telling everyone else that all these men were terrible humans. So like, why do you think, I don't know, does that make sense? Like, why do you
I
think
get
this
what you're
man is
saying.
any
Yeah.
better than all the ones you've run into first?
It
If
does.
anything, she should be more like guarded to these guys, not like,
Be-
oh, this nice man with the beautiful brown eyes that just batted his eyelashes at me is sexy.
But
Like, what?
Andrew is painted as like a god level manipulator, Barbara. It's not like this is just some guy who smiled at her. Like this is
At the
supposed to be a
bar,
guy
yeah.
that's like serial killer level
I
like
think we're going
manipulation.
too far. I apologize. I get it. You guys aren't changing my mind, but I get it. Fine, whatever.
No, and I see it from your perspective too, though. Like I feel like with her street smarts, I too thought, why are you making the decisions that you're making? But then I think psychologically, knowing what I know about how manipulative narcissists can be, like they be sneaky and they be tricking the smartest people out there. So
I get that, but I feel like after the first time, you're not effing around with me again. Just saying. But anyways, we can move on. My bad. Millie is Millie.
Millie is Millie.
No, it was a good
Anyway,
discussion.
I went from being concerned about her to annoyed and then angry and then appreciating her perseverance and ingenuity and then ultimately like her tenacity to survive all of her given circumstances. That was my assessment of Millie.
Moving on to our next question. Nina Winchester is a character who defies simple characterization. How did you interpret her behavior and motivations as the story unfolded? Well, I, like Millie, thought she was a crazy bitch for the entirety of part one because that's how she was acting. And when I say that, I like genuinely like certifiable like issues that are affecting everybody. And like you see this behavior where she's like, seemingly like jealous that Millie has cooked a good meal, so she destroys the kitchen in the morning, and so you see all this like really really strange behavior. So no, I didn't like Nina at first. Nina was very irritating. I was like, wow, this this rich lady is just abusing the housemaid. But then literally like got to the end of part one, and that was one of my holy shit moments when it like figuring out that like Nina had been kind of masterminding this, and then it shows you the beginning of part two where it shows like why and the backstory as to what happened to Nina and the story of how Andrew effectively manipulated her and lured her in and then broke her and kept her that way for a while until she couldn't take anymore and she was in survival mode and was trying to find a way out. I don't endorse her method of getting out. But I also understand that and can empathize that she was in a situation where she was effectively in survival mode. She had tried all these ways that she thought were fantastic ways to get out of a situation. And every single time he came back and was like, if you do this, I'm going to come back with this and it's going to get worse. And like one of the times, like he literally gets her committed to a psychiatric hospital and convinces everybody that she's actually crazy. And I think a little bit convinced her she was crazy for a little while. It's just, there's all this stuff. And then what was the other thing that happened? He convinced her that if she killed him, then his lawyer has instructions to, leak all this stuff and get all this information out. So it looks like it was her fault and to make sure she loses custody of her daughter. And that's going to be her punishment, which is the one thing in her entire life. That's the only thing she does not want to lose is her daughter. And so when you read part two, you get a whole new perspective on Nina Winchester. And it made me go from like thinking she's this annoying rich lady to being like, oh my God, what? And like all this stuff is happening. And you really empathize with her character in a way that I probably, if you'd asked me halfway through part one, it's like, oh, do you think you'll empathize with Nina? I'd be like, no, she's horrible. But it definitely flips. And then you get to part three, and that's where things get a little bit dicey because you learn that she's actually orchestrated this event and she's lured Millie into a trap, effectively the same way Andrew lured her into a trap. But in this case, she's trying to replace herself with Andrew because she realizes that Andrew will only let her go if he has another plaything he can torture in the attic. And so that is like, it's dark as hell, but I love that twist in the story because it shows like how desperate she was, like, because she knows how bad it's going to be. And she's still like, it's the only way I can get me and my daughter out. So like, that's the decision I have to make. She was a really interesting character. Nina, and I told Barbara this, Nina was probably my favorite character in the book. I really enjoyed her character arc and everything and the way her story bounced around. I really enjoyed her character.
Yeah, I think Nina would be very interesting to have in the therapy office from a standpoint of many different things. Obviously, I also hated her from the start. I was like, she's clinically and psychologically unstable, jealous. There are many times that I felt pity for her despite like those attributes in the first half still. Like I still empathize with her because at the time you're made to think like that, I don't know, she's just insecure or she's just, also her friends are really shitty. Like the friends that she has, like, I don't know, there's many different times that they're like hanging out, and obviously we find out later that her friends believed Andrew about her being crazy, and like I feel like she needs some new friends, but that's beside the
We had that one
point.
friend literally like reported back to Andrew
Yes.
what she told. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's what got her committed or maybe something, I don't know. So then
It
obviously
is,
as
yeah.
the story unfolded, like I was very empathetic towards her, understood the erratic behaviors were all kind of orchestrated. Even though in my opinion that still didn't absolve her of the behavior. Even Enzo was like, how could you bring someone else into it kind of thing. Like, and I get that she was desperate to get her and Cecilia out of there. I just feel like there's got to be another way somehow. But I get she felt very trapped and all of that. I don't know. I didn't obviously end the novel hating Nina, but I felt like there was enough things that I didn't like that I don't know. I could empathize with her. I feel like they're both, so Nina and Millie are both very desperate for different reasons. And like they both make shitty decisions in the course of the novel that I disagree with and think are not good. And then I feel like the way that it ended obviously ended up kind of working out for both of them, so to speak. But it Nina knew that that probably wasn't how it was going to go when she brought Millie in. Like she didn't. So I don't know. Nina is a complex character, and I feel like I can empathize with her motivation because I have kids and I understand how like you just would flip a switch and go into like do whatever you have to do kind of thing. But it's still morally gray, I guess.
So I'll have to say this. With the book, I will have to give it to Freida. Ooh, what's her last name? The author Freida.
Freida
McFadden.
McFadden.
Like she wrote extremely complex characters. Like these, all of them. I mean, Andrew's kind of like your stereotypical psychopath, but like the two women, like she did such a good job to show two different women in two very desperate situations, backs against the wall, and how they get out of that. And I thought that was a very interesting way when you look at the whole book as a like the whole picture for both of these characters, because like both of the things that they do out of desperation, like you can justify both of them. You really can. And it's like, whose side are you on? Like technically we're not supposed to pick sides, but like if you're going to look at a bad guy versus good guy, obviously Andrew's like the top tier worst person, but like both Millie and Nina aren't good people. They're not. Like, and it's hard to, that's what I'm saying, it's hard to root for either of them, as that's why I struggle with the baddest character award, because like yes, they both have done some really cool badass stuff, but like I cannot root for either of them because they're both shitty people. Like really they are, in different ways. So for me, Nina is hard to categorize, or like how do you do this, because in the first part you're made to think that she is all of these things because she is gaslighting Millie to believe that. And I felt like it was a little too obvious that this was happening. So I was like, okay, obviously none of this is true. Like she's clearly over exaggerating all of this stuff for a reason. And like, what is the reason? She has a shitty husband. I feel like that was a very obvious trope there, because if not, I feel like unless it was like you're made to think that and then all of a sudden she really is, but I feel like that kind of would have been like too obvious. I don't know, that was just me. So I was in Nina's corner in the sense was like, I feel like there's a reason why she's acting out. The reason is Andrew is manipulating her or beating her or something like that. And so the whole part one book, I was still kind of like, okay, I don't think any of this is true. Something is going to happen. We're going to know more. And obviously, in part two, we learned exactly what Nina has gone through. And like I mentioned earlier, like I can empathize because she tried. She literally tried every single way that she thought she could to get away from him without involving someone else. And she still couldn't. So at this point, she's like, I'm going to pick this person, which is funny because she picked Millie because of what she thought Millie could do. Originally, she wanted Millie to murder Andrew because she thought that was the only way she can get away with like getting away from him is having someone murder him. And that's why she picked Millie, because she's like, this girl has that in her. I don't have that in me. She's like, I just don't. And she also has her daughter to think about, and that's why she picked Millie. She's like, Millie has nobody. She has nobody or no one. So if she, which is kind of crappy of her, but like if she ends up in jail again, oh well, you know. And then she's like, okay, maybe not. Like, I don't want to do that to her. I just want to get away, and then I'll get far, far away from him. And then she was like, okay, Millie's the person who, like, once she learns that Andrew is this awful human, she's going to get away too. Like, she has it in her to get away from him. And she was right. Millie does have that drive. So I can empathize. And like I said, like what she did isn't right. She shouldn't have done that. Maybe what she should have done was partnered, and I was hoping that was what was going to happen, was she's going to partner with Millie, and both of them would have like helped each other, and like she could have confided. Yeah, I was hoping that she was going to confide in Millie, and then they were going to work together to get rid of Andrew. And obviously that didn't happen. So, but I do really enjoy that part of the story where she, the author, kind of showed you like the bad parts of people and like what happens when you put these people against in these situations. And like you can, like I said, like you can look at both of them and be like, I understand why they did what they did. I just feel like for Nina's character, why I have more of a gripe with Millie is because Nina's character to me made sense to me. She was manipulated into getting married with Andrew, and literally her whole like what is it called? Like her whole reason for surviving is for her daughter, and that's never changed for her. Her own motivation, that never changed. She's like, I can't murder him because I will go to jail and what will happen to my daughter. I can't do this because if something happens to him, he's going to do something to my daughter. I can't go to all these people because no one believes me, because if I get back into the psych ward and something's going to happen to my daughter. Like her characterization made sense to me. The way she wrote her. For Millie, it did not. But I liked both of them, but I do not want to root for either of them because they are very problematic as human beings. But once again, I could empathize why Nina did what she did.
I think like my only redeeming quality for Nina was that she, not that it's okay or that it makes it okay like you said, was that, but that she picked someone that wasn't just like a college student, like completely innocent person.
Right.
Necessarily. She picked someone that she's like, okay, well maybe this person will be able to
take care of herself.
But I don't know that Nina knew that, like, because she knew, because she did a background check, she knew that she was like a murderer, but I don't think that Nina knew like the motivation behind it. So like
she did because she hired a PI to do all of this stuff and found everything about Millie. She literally knew every single thing about Millie.
I remembered that she had done like the background test. I just couldn't remember if she knew like the reason behind the murder, because then like I don't view that, like if I'm trying to hire like just a ruthless killer to like murder my husband, I feel like I would view Nina as more of like a vigilante, which I guess in this case that makes sense too.
But it's the way that she killed the kid. It wasn't like it was self-defense. She smacked him in the head with the whatever rock or whatever was in the room like 8 times. Right. So that's why she went. So she knew everything about Millie, and that's what I'm saying. Yeah. There's a line in the book which I thought was really interesting that Nina says, like, yes, I picked Millie for A, B, and C, but it's also, I'm like, obviously this is not the quote, but like the reasoning was because she's like, she's strong to do what I can't. Like, I know that she is strong enough to do what I can't. And she literally says that. Like, Nina's like, I'm not strong enough to do this. But she is. She's like, I know that as soon as Andrew shows his cards, Millie is not one of those people who's going to stand back and let him. She's not a passive character. So it's weird that she's passive in the beginning. Because
he's just so charming, Barbara.
I guess. But like, cause like Nina knew. She's like, she's not passive. I'm passive. Like, she even says that. She's like, Millie is not a passive person.
And to your point, Barbara, I only found myself rooting for our 2 main characters one time each. For Nina, it was in part 2 when her and Enzo were putting together the plot that even though I knew it was going to fail, I was rooting for her because like I really like, you know, you still want that to succeed, even though you know you're reading like it's gone like 3 years ago or whatever, and like it doesn't, because otherwise the rest of the book wouldn't be here. But and then for Millie in part 3, when she flips the script on Andrew, and he's the one locked in the attic.
I was rooting for them. 100. I was like, go for him. Like, these women need to murder the crap out of Andrew. It's just kind of like, even then, like, they're not good people. Like, neither of them
Right.
are very good people, you know?
Yep, I know what you mean. Let's see. Next question. How does Freida McFadden explore themes of power, control, and manipulation within the Winchester household?
I mean, I feel like we've covered some of this already, but like from the start, the theme of power imbalance is present, right? Millie is obviously at the Winchester family's mercy because she's otherwise living in her car and she just got out of prison and she's struggling financially and she's struggling mentally. And so, like, she's viewing this job as a huge blessing at first. She's like, oh, I can't believe that they would not do a background check. Like, what idiots? Like, or I can't believe, like, I got lucky enough to, which I too, with what Barbara said, like the whole time I'm like, usually if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. But also, like, I've never been that level of desperate, so I can't put myself in that position. So she views it as a blessing. The Winchesters use her predicament as a way to control her life, essentially, and then treat her like less than human. Obviously, Andrew is less guilty of that. But Nina and Cecilia, honestly, both treat her that way, which was frustrating. As far as manipulation goes, there's obviously plenty to go around in the novel. Andrew is the master manipulator, but Nina is also very capable of manipulation as well. She's learned from the best, I suppose. And you have to have something, a little off there to be able to do that to somebody else too. But she's manipulative. She's also kind of, I'd be curious how much Cecilia's behaviors are just a reflection of how her mom treats Millie, because like Cecilia kind of treats her like shit too, and like does sneaky things to get her in trouble, like throwing her mom's work notes away, or like like Cecilia does some of those things. And
Cecilia never threw her notes away.
Maybe not. So Cecilia, was it like the peanut butter thing then? Something.
No, the peanut butter. She was actually legitimately allergic to peanut butter, and Andrew kept the peanut butter at the house as a tactic for, like, at any point in time, I can murder your daughter type thing.
But we didn't learn that till later. So in that scene, when you're reading it about Cecilia, it reads like Cecilia asks for a peanut butter sandwich or whatever.
She didn't. Millie just makes her a peanut butter sandwich because there's peanut butter in the home. And she's right to think, like, okay, well, if your daughter is allergic to peanut butter, why the hell do you have peanut butter? And it's not like Nita can say, well, she actually is allergic to peanut butter, but Andrew will do something if I throw away the peanut butter, so I can't. It has to be here. It's such a, like, a triple layer thing, really.
It is. But so there's so much manipulation on all fronts, really. Nina is obviously super psychologically manipulative towards Millie. Nina is simultaneously being psychologically manipulated by Andrew and has been for years. Andrew is being super manipulative towards both Nina and Millie. And I think once Millie enters the picture, Andrew's focus shifts a little bit from Nina, obviously, which is the goal. He becomes more like abusive, controlling, but then the manipulation and the charm go towards Millie. So then we see that. But Nina also kind of manipulates her friends too. Like, once I think she realizes that they're shitty friends, obviously, if they're going to turn her in. And so, like, she's kind of just manipulating everybody at one point or another just to get out and survive. But her manipulation of Millie was infuriating to read, just because, like, it was masked as, like, kindness and concern for the longest, and just the constant flip-flopping and, like, gaslighting. Obviously, we learn later that was being done to her, and it's a whole complex mess. But, like, just from my, I think, like, therapy perspective, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is awful on all the fronts. It's just bad. So yeah, lots of those themes in this one.
So, like Lauren mentioned, the themes of power, like, it starts with Andrew manipulating or exerting his power over pretty much everyone. Nina, Cecilia, anyone that he can manipulate with his money, essentially. Like the cops, the doctors, all her friends. And then after a while, Millie, obviously. And then same thing with Nina, like, she uses her power as the person who hired Millie to control her in that regard as well. As far as manipulation. Everyone in this book is manipulating everyone. Like, Andrew's manipulating literally every single person that he talks to, except for his mommy. Mommy Dearest was not manipulated by him because she was the one who was manipulating him. But that, yeah, he pretty much is manipulating everyone. Nina's manipulating Millie, and then Millie is kind of manipulating them in the sense that, like, she kept the fact that she went to jail for murder, and she lied on her resume essentially to get the job to begin with, and also lied to her parole officer. Like, she also was kind of lying and doing all this stuff. So, like, essentially this book is like a power or a how to manipulate everyone around you. So it's kind of, yeah, it's interesting, a very interesting theme of showing how some people, the power dynamic and the manipulation that everyone is essentially doing. I think the only person, Enzo is kind of, I wouldn't say he's manipulating, he is white lying, because he knew exactly what was going on and kind of left Millie to fend for herself, kind of, sort of.
All right, so I think you guys very nicely covered that. I actually do not have anything beyond that to add. So our next question is, the relationship between Millie and Cecilia is subtle but important. How does Cecilia's character contribute to the development of the story's tension?
I don't know if I would classify their relationship as important, to be honest with you. I feel like it just kind of adds to the fact that, like, Cecilia and Nina kind of seem like spoiled, rude bitches, essentially, for Millie's perspective, because essentially Cecilia's another tactic that both Nina and, well, I don't know if Nina's using, I think that's all Cecilia on her own, but Andrew is definitely using to gaslight Millie, and it actually works in, I guess, Nina's favor, because then Millie thinks that Nina legitimately is psychopath and crazy, because, like, Cecilia legitimately is allergic to peanut butter. That's why, like, Cecilia's like, oh my god, like, don't feed me peanut butter, I can't eat this, and Millie tells Nina that, and Nina's like, you know, she really is allergic to peanut butter. So Millie's like, so why do you have peanut butter in the house? Like, let me just throw it away. And she's like, no, don't do that. Because Nina knows, like, that Andrew is going to turn it around somehow. And then Millie mentioned this to Andrew, and he's like, oh, no, girl, she's not allergic. That's a lie. So Millie's like, okay. So outside of that, and except for the fact that Cecilia, like, throws her food on the ground and doesn't want to eat anything but nuggies, or something like that, in which case we never really did get the truth of the matter. Like, did she really like nuggies? Was Andrew lying about the nuggies? I want to know about the nuggies. Like, but outside of that, I don't really see how it's that important, to be honest. Like, Cecilia's just used to the fact that she's important because she's the only reason why Nina hasn't gone and left Andrew, essentially. Like, why she hasn't run away, why she hasn't murdered him, why she hasn't done all these things is because of Cecilia. So outside of that, I don't really feel like she's that important. I don't know, maybe that's just me.
She was a plot device, in my opinion,
Yes.
but it's Michael's turn.
Yeah, pretty much.
I agree with that, Lauren, and I agree with what you said too, Barbara.
A plot device.
The biggest thing that Cecilia's character did for me, story-wise, is my heart kind of broke for her when we find out, like, what's all going on with Nina. And my thought anyway, and this isn't laid out in the book, but my thought is that Cecilia is in an impossible situation where she knows that if she's very frustrated and she has all these emotions and she doesn't have anywhere to put them, because she knows if she puts them in the family home that then Andrew is going to punish her mom.
Mm-hmm.
And so then she sees her mom taking out, from the kid's perspective, in my mind, taking out her frustrations on Millie. And so I think Cecilia sees that as an outlet.
Hold on. I'm going to stop you there. I don't think Nina does any of that in front of Cecilia, because it always happens when she's out in school.
She did it in front of Cecilia a couple of times.
When did she do that? When? What part?
There was a scene where Cecilia was they were in the room and Nina was helping Cecilia get dressed in one of those crazy, stupid Victorian dresses, and Millie did something wrong. I don't remember exactly what it was, but Cecilia started yelling at her in front.
So
Nina started yelling at her.
She never helped her put on her dresses ever. That never happened. You're misremembering that.
I also remember some scenes where Nina, Millie, and Cecilia were all in the same room, and there was like, yeah, I'd have to go back and look
I
for
think
specific
you guys are
examples, though.
misremembering that, because from my perspective, Nina only is a huge C word with Millie outside of Cecilia not being there. It tends to be when she's like upstairs changing or hasn't come down, or she's in school. I don't recall any point in time, because at one point, like when Cecilia throws her food on the ground and they get home, Nina goes like, oh, like this meth's or whatever, and then Cecilia like happily trots away and leaves the room, and then that's when Nina goes like, how dare you make a meth in my house, Millie, and blah 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 about the food. Like, I'm pretty sure she waits to do that.
In any case, that's not super relevant to the point that I was trying to make, which was just that Cecilia sees Millie as a third party that she can throw these emotions at, and she can throw the tantrums at, who is not going to be someone who will cause someone she cares about to be punished. And I think that's the big thing for me that we see from Cecilia in the story.
Yeah, I felt like Cecilia has adopted a lot of her mother's manipulative tendencies just in general, which kids developmentally, like, they're going to adopt behaviors that they are around a lot. And so that makes sense. No shade at Cecilia for that. It's not her fault. But she would act like things were okay with Millie and then, like, do things to get her in trouble. But luckily, Millie was able to see through that part, I think, and empathize with her eventually. I do think, though, like, I know you both kind of said, well, I don't know how important the relationship was. I think that without Cecilia's character, that Millie would not have seen some of the manipulations that Nina was doing until later. Like, I think Cecilia served as an accelerator, I guess, in Millie's ability to kind of have, I guess, like, she was like a red flag waver, so to speak, that I think maybe if she hadn't been a factor and she was just like a housemaid and not a nanny, I think she wouldn't have seen some of like Nina's craziness as overtly as she did on the front end. But that was the only thing that I was like, oh, well, if we didn't have Cecilia there, then we might not have had that. But otherwise, I think she's very minor.
We go to our next question. Were the twists in the story effective in surprising you, or did you anticipate any of them? How did they affect your overall enjoyment? I would say that a bulk of the twists were very effective in surprising me, which is not going to be surprising to any of our listeners who have ever listened to me talk about making predictions or being surprised before. But there was definitely some crazy twists in this one. I mean, the big ones I definitely did not anticipate. Obviously, as far as my enjoyment, that's one of my favorite parts of his book is all like the twists back and forth and the different craziness that unfolds and the oh shit moments. So I really enjoyed them.
Yeah, I think that they were effective also in surprising me, simply just because there were so many of them. Like, immediately when I started the novel, I had an initial prediction. Then, like, a fourth of the way through, that one got ruled out. So then I had another one. Halfway through, that one got the kibosh. So, like, I just stopped trying to predict it eventually and just ended up being along for the ride, so to speak. But I definitely stayed up way too late, like 2 nights in a row, to finish it just because I needed to know what happened. I anticipated some of them, and others I was like, holy shit. But I read it before you guys did, so I didn't have anybody to like text about.
Did I find some of them surprising? No. Like I mentioned before, I pretty much figured Andrew was going to be the bad guy, and there's a reason why Nina was being all psychopath or whatever. I figured there was a reason behind that. I didn't anticipate that he was locking bitches up in the attic, to be honest with you. Although, like, with all the scratches and stuff, I guess that was kind of blatant, like he was doing something in the attic. It was kind of weird. What I didn't predict was I thought Andrew had mommy issues. And that's why, like, whenever you kind of heard about, like, how he reacted with his mom and stuff like that, I thought he was just trying to, like she never gave him love. And so I thought it was him, like, trying so hard to be like, look, all these good things I've done, mommy, type relationship. But it turns out that, like, the mom was the original abuser, or at least that we're aware of. Like, who knows if it was, like, her dad versus her mom that did it to her. Obviously, this is a cycle. But, like, it was her to him and then him to the women that he was dating or with. So I was not anticipating that she was the OG psychopath in the relationship. And I definitely was not expecting the whole, at the end during his funeral, the mom's like, I always did tell him to, like, take care of his teeth. And she kind of was like, good girl, murdering him. I was like, what the F? Like, I was actually expecting, like, her to be like, distraught that her homeboy got killed or something like that, and she was just so blasé about it, like, nah, like, he deserved to die because he didn't do what I told him. So that was really interesting. But I feel like the other stuff I kind of figured out as much, because I like it just, I don't know, I feel like I've read enough books to be like, oh yes, of course it's gonna be him that's the issue, not Nina, and she's doing all this crazy stuff for a reason. I didn't know like what exactly the reason was. So did that affect my overall enjoyment? I don't think so, because like, yes, I figured as much, but I didn't think like how he was doing what he was doing. Like, I didn't think that he was locking them up in the attic and making them do all these crazy stuff and then only giving them 3 bottles of water and having them defecate in a freaking bucket. Like, none of that. I was just like, this is exactly how he was doing this. Like, that. So I don't think it ruined the enjoyment for me, knowing that he still was going to be the bad guy in the relationship type thing. I still enjoyed that reveal, if you would call that.
I also agree with you. The biggest twist in the book for me was the mom at the funeral. Like, you start thinking, like, when her reaction is seeing like his teeth have all been pulled out, she's like, oh, her first thought isn't like, oh my god, what happened? It's, well, I did tell him to do better at cleaning his teeth. And like, she's almost like a kudos, like, good job, carrying on the punishment. Like, what? Like, makes you think like if his like flesh had been like scraped off, she's like, yeah, I always told him that if he didn't clean himself well enough, I'd make him use steel wool.
Probably.
What the hell is wrong? Anyway, it was crazy. But moving on to our next question, how does the use of dual settings, both Millie and Nina's life before and during their time at the Winchester home, enhance the suspense?
As with most time jumping stories, I enjoy getting snippets of the past information to like try and fill gaps from present day, or in this case, sometimes create more chaos and confusion. I typically, especially, I physically read this book, which is important because I don't like the time hopping when I'm doing audiobook alone because I get confused and it's hard to keep up with. But like, if I'm able to physically read, and this is one that I read in California away from my children, so I actually got to read the physical book, but I enjoyed the elements, and I think it enhances the suspense because you're getting like these snippets of, oh, like, when are we going to find out why she's in prison, or like what led up to this, and then I don't know. I enjoyed that.
I enjoy dual settings. I like when we learn about characters before that. I like the time jumping stories as well. I feel like I think Nina's was done better because we got a lot more of it, whereas Millie's, we still just got a little snippet, and we got more of like what happened through Nina, and just a little bit when Millie was explaining to herself, like, because it's an inner monologue essentially, since it is first person. She kind of describes it, like, kind of what happened or whatever. So I feel like Nina's was done better, and Millie's was just kind of just to fill in a few blanks here. I kind of honestly would have liked to have seen more of Millie's, because I feel like maybe I would have enjoyed her character more if we had more of like from her perspective. But I mean, it does kind of leave you to think, I don't know. I think I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, I think it was done well for both of them. I just feel like Nina's was done a little bit better versus Millie's. I think Millie's, it was a little too late for me, I think, in the novel, and it just kind of felt like thrown in more than Nina's.
I mostly agree with what you're saying on that, Barbara. I liked the dual settings and the time jump, like Lauren mentioned. That was interesting and well done, especially for Nina. And I'm not going to beat a dead horse here because I know I already talked about this, but I think that I would have preferred having the Millie backstory part happen either as a prologue to the book or sometime in part one. It's just like a little interjection chapter where we got that thrown in. I think it would have added a lot to part one and some of the understanding of Millie.
I think the reason the author did it that way, because we're supposed to be shocked of finding out that Millie like murdered someone. But I feel like it was, like I said, I feel like if you know anything about the judicial system here, like, it's kind of an obvious, like, she didn't steal. She didn't, like, maybe she beat someone to almost their death, not physically a death type thing, or like she drove drunk or something, but like she didn't seem to have a drinking problem. She didn't seem to have that kind of like stupidity and like, I'm gonna drink and then drive. Like, so I just feel like the only explanation would be like, she clearly had to have done something really bad. So I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like for Millie's, and we don't even get her perspective of like what happened. It's her explaining what happened in a really short burst, not like her actual point of view of what happened that night. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. I would have liked to have seen that, honestly. I feel like it would have added more to see, instead of being told that she's like this violent character. It would have been kind of cool to see.
Yeah, because we got more of that with like Nina's flashbacks. We got
exactly,
more visualizations versus like memories. I guess.
Yep.
Let's see. Next question. Freida McFadden uses first-person narration to tell Millie's story. How did this perspective influence your connection to the events and characters?
So I think for this book, I honestly think the first-person narration was not done well. I feel like if we would have gotten a third-person perspective for Millie, I feel like I wouldn't have found her so annoying. But then you would lose the whole inner monologue of her and how she felt. And so it's one of those things, it's kind of hard to be like, this would have been better, but then you would have lost a lot of X, Y, and Z because of that. I just feel like, I don't know, maybe she did it on purpose. Maybe we're not supposed to like Millie in the beginning. I'm not quite sure. I haven't quite figured that out, if I'm supposed to like her or not. I don't know how others felt about her, and I'm kind of curious. I kind of want to see, maybe read some other reviews and see how people felt about her in the first part. But I wasn't a huge fan of the first person narration because she honestly felt extremely whiny to me, and she felt really underage. Like, she's supposed to be 27, she was acting very young, but I've already explained that. I feel like that was on purpose, because if you know, like, she was in jail for 10 years during the formative years, so it's like you don't develop how you're supposed to. So maybe that was intentional, and maybe it's intentional that she's supposed to be like this. I wasn't a fan of that, but like, I guess it worked in her, for her. So I don't know. I feel like I'm going back and forth, like flipping. Did it work? Did it not work? I guess it worked, because that's how you get the perspective, because you see literally everything through her eyes. And I would hate to say she's unreliable narrator, because she kind of is, but I feel like there's a distinction between like unreliable and just, there's another version of narrator that's not that, and I can't remember what it's called, but you definitely get that from her perspective. So maybe in third person you wouldn't get that suspense feeling, and you wouldn't get all this stuff and her hate towards, so it would have been a completely different book. Because like I mentioned before, Millie's the only person that we get first person perspective. When we switch over to Nina's, it's third person. It's not first person. So it's very interesting that she did that. And thinking about it, I think that was done on purpose. And maybe we really aren't supposed to like, maybe be like, oh, Millie, why are you doing all these stupid things? So that's probably intentional. So, hey, she got me there.
I think it was intentional. I think we're not supposed to like Millie, especially at first, because that's one of the plot ways that it could go, is that Millie's actually the bad guy, because we don't know her prison past. And so like my mind instantly went to, oh, like she's gonna ultimately, it's gonna read like the tropey, like, oh, the nanny's gonna be the victim, but really like she's gonna end up infiltrating this house and like
fun.
Running
she murders
shit down.
everybody.
So I think like
in
the beginning, we're supposed to be like wary of her at the minimum. But I do think, yeah, it's intentional that they keep it first person for her and not for the others.
And I'll just add briefly for this. I generally don't like when they bounce between like first person for one character and not for others, but I think that it was well done in this case to tell this story for reasons that Barbara and Lauren have already highlighted. That the way that McFadden wants you to feel about Millie is more effective through the first person. That might have been harder to paint if the whole thing was done third person. But that's all I'll add there. And then our final question: if you were to place yourself in Millie's shoes, how do you think you would have navigated the challenges she faced? Well, I probably wouldn't have slept with my boss. I think the other stuff, like it's tricky because you're talking about dealing with like a difficult employer, where in her perspective, like her boss is so with one of her bosses, Nina is she's effectively torturing her, and so I don't know how I handle that. It's not fun to have a manager or a boss that is putting you in intentionally tricky situations to seemingly just make you have a bad time. Obviously, like I said, I wouldn't have slept with my boss. That's a pretty awful thing. You'd hope that if you're ever in a situation like how part three plays out, where she's in like torture mode, where she's being not locked into the attic and forced to do all those things, you'd hope you'd have the strength to get through that and then fight back. But who knows? I'd like to think that I'd be able to, but at the end of the day, I don't think anybody really knows until they're in that situation.
I just feel like I think I definitely would not have stuck around as long as she did. I think, especially like Barbara said, like given my background, if I am Millie, like I am an aggressive prison hardened criminal situation, and like I just don't think I'm gonna put up with the BS. I would have figured out a way to quit or leave even before the whole sleeping with her boss situation unfolds. Like even before she starts like being charmed by Andrew. Like as soon as the Cecilia situation happened, like the peanut butter thing, which was really early on, and then like the whole work notes, like you threw away my work notes, blah blah blah. I would have realized how unhinged Nina was. I would have been back living in my car so fast. Like I would have pieced out. Like you could not have paid me enough to put up with that shit. So also I can't necessarily relate to how desperate she was, but like just knowing what I know about, I guess, community programs and social work and stuff, like she could have found a job somewhere else, maybe not paying this well, but nobody's like no amount of money is worth like dealing with that type of unhinged boss. So in that way I feel like I just would have bounced. I would have.
Yeah, I feel like it's hard. Like Michael mentioned, first off, I would not be sleeping with my boss. Like that's just a no-no. Like I'm sorry, that's one thing I absolutely hated about her character. Like I hate that we do this trope. Like, oh yes, a man bats his little eyelashes at me and I'm gonna go sleep with him. Like, come on, like, you kidding me? Like, you can't
Because
keep it
so
in your
many dumb
pants.
bitches do that.
I get that, but it's so frustrating. Like, I don't care. Like, you knowingly slept with a married man. Like, I don't care how unhinged the wife is. Like, I'm sorry, if the wife is unhinged, there's something wrong with the man to be with an unhinged woman. Like, I'm just saying, like, they're both unhinged then. Like, crazy attracts crazy. I'm just saying. So, like, is she cray-cray? Then he's cray-cray. Then you need to leave this cray-cray house because, like, there is something wrong with this family. So I'm just Millie, I'm just saying, girl, the D was not worth it. Clearly. I don't care if you're touch starved. Go find someone else. Throw yourself at Enzo again. I don't know.
She tried, and Enzo shut her down hard.
I get, but like she also went really awkwardly with him. Like she didn't even like flirt with him. She just went.
Right, there was no lead up at
Me
all.
on this counter. I'm like, girl, like you need to like, I don't know, sauce him up a little, rizz him up a little. This, I mean, I get he's a man, but like, come on, like. But anyways, as far as everything else, like I do feel bad for her because she was just defending her friend. Did she go a little overboard? Who's to say? You know? Who's to say if murder was a little overboard for what that kid deserved? But like Lauren mentioned, like, yeah, I don't know that much about the system, but to me, it just shows how broken our system is because, like, she did her time. If you're not giving her a chance in any freaking job, like, what do you expect her to do? Like, she needs a job to live. If she can't get hired, how is she supposed to not, like, not break probation and all this other stuff? It's like this vicious cycle that we have in this country. And I will get, like, on a soapbox and discuss all of this issue. Like, so it's hard. Like, I get it, but I also would have pieced the F out from that household. Like, no amount of money is worth the crap that she was putting up with. But I really did want her to be like, okay, clearly Nina, there's something going on. And I kind of wanted her to pull Nina inside and be like, homegirl, what the hell's going on? Like, why are you this
You
psychopath?
okay?
Right. Like, what is going I really wanted them to, like, join up and destroy Andrew. And I'm kind of sad that didn't happen. But it is what it is, I guess.
I mean, I did predict at one point, totally incorrectly, that Millie was the bad person, and this was going to end up being like Millie's a serial killer, and her thing is she's
that would have been cool.
She's a family destroyer,
right?
I think that would have been a cooler twist. And I kind of wanted the two things because there's not a question about this about like how we felt about the ending. I do kind of want to just kind of mention this. I was a little disappointed in how this was wrapped up. Like, oh, magically the cop that is the dad of the first woman that Andrew abused magically is the cop and like knows and kind of covered up this whole thing, and it was tied in this pretty little bow, and neither of them went to jail, even though it was clearly that he got murdered and dehydrated and all this other stuff. I kind of feel like that was a bit of a cop out, I'm not gonna lie. And then I also feel like Nina Girl should have given some more money to Millie. Like, how much money did you inherit? Like, it seemed to me that Andrew was like a multi-millionaire because he was the CEO of this company. So like, homegirl obviously inherited a crap ton of money, and you only give Millie like a year's worth of payment, which we don't know how much she was getting paid, but like, I don't know, I feel like that's it's probably not in the millions. Like, you couldn't have given her more money? Like, she essentially saved you. Like, did she kind of do it in a weird way and murder the guy and went a little overboard? Yes, sure. But that's what you wanted her to do anyways. Like, couldn't you have, like, thrown her a bone here?
But if she paid her for the next few years, it would ruin the plot of the future books.
So that's another... Okay, and third, I don't think there should have been more. I feel like the way it ended was really good, because it's like, oh, she's gonna go and get another job and maybe like murder more men? Like, cool.
Because in book 2 now, Millie can evolve into the family destroyer serial killer. So I
don't like that. I understand that, but I really feel like this book was good as a standalone. I don't think it's I haven't read the second one, obviously. I just don't feel like there's enough for that, because at this point, what are you gonna do? Like, the same plot over again? Like, unless it's gonna be like the poor man actually is the poor man and the wife is actually the abusive one. You know,
I'll let you know. I own it, but I haven't started it yet. But I'll let you know.
Okay, I don't know. I feel like it doesn't... I don't know. I feel like all the suspense and like the oh, gasp moments kind of are already taken out. So like, unless you're gonna do like a double switcheroo, like you think it's gonna be the guy and then it's really the woman, and I don't know, maybe it's actually Millie this time. Like, I don't know, you're gonna turn into a murderous psychopath. Okay, but I don't know. I just feel like it should have just been one and done. So those are my 3 issues with the ending of the book.
The only thing I'll say about the ending is I feel like it wrapped up too quickly. I liked I liked the twist that it ended up like the detective was actually his first person's dad or whatever it was. But I think that would have been a more fun twist if you had a little bit of time where Nina and Millie were sweating, like, oh God, like we're screwed, our lives are over. And then he comes in and is like, listen, actually, we're just going to sweep this under the rug because I know how this guy's a monster. But like, you don't get that tension. It's just all of a sudden it seems like Barbara said, like it's all like nicely wrapped in a bow. And I think that would have been more fun after a little bit of tension as to like, what's going to happen? Are we all going to jail? Like,
also wonder if she doesn't bring up, like, if something doesn't catch up to them in the next novel too. Like with the whole, like, I wonder if it's as pretty of a package like when she continues the story. I'll be curious to see if there's anything that goes back to it. Like, oh shit, like they found a piece of evidence or something came up, and then it like in the next novel they talk about that. But I have no idea.
Because I feel like if like it's one of your like people drops dead, okay, it's an accident. But like if you leave a trail of dead men, like something's gonna give. Like someone's gonna be like, I'm weird. What's going on? Every time she gets hired as a nanny, some person dies.
Then there'll be a pattern. Anyway, that is the end of our discussion questions. Let's talk about our individual scores for this one. Barbara, what did you give The Housemaid?
I give it a 7, and I feel like it's pretty apparent why. Like, I had quite a few issues with certain things. Outside of that, I thought it was a good book. So I'm not gonna keep beating a dead horse at this point.
I also gave it a 7. I think I laid out pretty clearly why I gave it a 7 too. So I'm not going to go into all those details because that was the point of a discussion question. So, but yeah, I gave it a 7. I did enjoy the story overall. I thought the twists were a lot of fun.
I gave it an 8, probably just because of how psychologically twisty it was. This is kind of my jam genre-wise, so I enjoyed it. I've read her other books too, and they're all equally as twisty.
Oh, I was going to ask you, you've read her other books, so is the way she writes similar then, or no?
I think it she has a writing style, yeah, but I'm trying to think if Don't Lie is one of my, like, I would say top books that I've read by her so far. Probably just because it has a therapist in it and that whole trope, but it's like, I think it's written really well, but I think, everybody likes different styles, so you would have to like read it or start it and see if you think it's similar enough.
Yeah,
but
I'm just curious, like, because I did have a slight issue with her writing style, but I wasn't sure if that was intentional for Millie's character. That's why I'm more than happy to pick up. Like, I liked her enough to pick up another book. So
yeah, and Don't Lie is a standalone. It's
okay.
Like a one and done, and like I think most of her, this is her only series.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, fair.
So like I mentioned earlier, our group score for this one was a 7.3, repeating out of 10. So obviously we enjoyed this one. Please let us know on in socials if you guys liked the book as well, or if you read it. But otherwise, that's all we got for this episode. So make sure you're following Badass Literature for free in your favorite podcast app. Give us a rating and leave us a review if they allow you to. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media. Our handle is @BadassLitPod on Instagram, Facebook, and now Goodreads.
Have feedback about today's episode? You can contact us by writing to badassliteraturesociety@gmail.com. You can also send us a DM or leave a comment on any of our social media handles that Michael mentioned 10 seconds ago.
And with that, thank you so much for listening. We will see you next month. I'm Michael.
I'm Barbara.
I'm Lauren.
Don't let a crazy housemaid kill your creepy husband.
Or do.
Your choice.